Steve Gamache here with another Chef Knives to Go quick look product review, and what we're looking at in this episode is the Mizuno Hontanren. This is the blue or Aogami number 2 Gyuto 240mm knife. This knife line, as mentioned, has a core steel of Aogami or blue paper number 2, a reactive high carbon steel from Hitachi. The heat treat on that is approximately 62 to 63 Rockwell. The construction is a 3-layer sandwich with a softer reactive soft iron cladding over the top of that blue number 2 Aogami core. So the entire blade is reactive, and these can be quite reactive. The cladding can be often more reactive than the core steel. So you're going to have to manage that, keep an eye on it, maybe polish it once in a while. But do expect it to react, especially when you first get rolling. Some people like to put a preemptive patina on these things. Proteins are cool because they show blues and purples and stuff, but it does have some lacquer on it as well. Some of it has been wiped off. I used it and then I polished it with some metal polish, and I took some of the lacquer off, but it's got a fairly heavy lacquer coating, especially on the blade road area here, where they shouldn't necessarily call it a blade road, but where they've got that visual change in the pattern on the blade. Anyway, so this one will look a little bit different than out of the box. The weight on the knife is about 6.5 ounces, 185 grams, so it's definitely a solid middleweight. The dimensions will vary a little bit from knife to knife. This particular one is about 235 millimeters on the edge from tip to chin or back of the blade. The overall length about 15.2 inches on this sample. The spine thickness coming out of the handle on this one's about 3.3 millimeters, and then it holds a fair amount of that. It thins out just a little bit. Does not have much distal taper. And then thins out with the grind at the very tip. So this blade is pretty stiff and pretty stout. Again, it does not have a whole lot of distal taper on it. The blade height is about 49.3 millimeters. And the handle's nothing fancy. It's a D-shaped hoe wood with a buffalo horn ferrule on it. And nothing fancy. It's a light handle, so the balance point is going to be fairly far forward on this because the blade's got some mass to it. So there's the balance point for me, and then my pinch grip is behind that. So you get definitely some weight forward bias as far as balance point goes, and you can feel that, mass for some extra power when cutting. Handle circumference is kind of a standard 76 millimeter ferrule wood junction. Let's get a close-up look at the blade. These are not made in the same style as, let's say, Konosuke. They do not have quite the same finish level, so you've got some embossed kanji on this side, on the left side of the blade. And then you've got plain right side of the blade, and you can see the machine finish. It's got a longitudinal finish, which is kind of nice because it really hides scratches. So as you clean a knife, you're usually wiping it this way, and so that way it really hides the scratches well. The spine on these is not polished like it would be on, let's say, a Konosuke, so don't expect that out of the box. That's not what you're going to get. It could be relieved a little bit more, I think, on the edges, but it definitely doesn't have that high level of polish and roundness that you'd see on a Konosuke Fujiyama, for example. Same thing, it's been relieved on the spine. I shouldn't say spine, the choil into the neck, but it's got a little bit rough around the edges that could be cleaned up. This is a knife, however, that with maybe, I don't know, probably half an hour's worth of work, if you take some time to polish out the spine, round it off a little bit, polish out that choil neck area, you can really up the level of fit and finish on this blade quite a bit. So you can definitely elevate it if you wish to do so. I'd say the out-of-the-box edge on this was about a 5 out of 10. It just kind of have an average, kind of quickie out-of-the-box edge on it. It will sharpen up nicely. I have a feeling the steel's got really good edge retention characteristics because I did go ahead and sharpen this, and it's a little bit on the wear resistance side. I thought it took a little bit of work to get it where I wanted it, but it'll get really sharp. So nice and sharp. So like I said, I have a feeling the heat treat's really nice on this, and it'll probably have good edge retention characteristics. This is not a full-on laser performer, but it's got a lot of kind of real integral characteristics, integrity on the board, and goes through product pretty well. Again, you might have to use a little bit of muscle to kind of keep it going through some of the cuts, but it's kind of authoritative, and part of that's the mass of the blade. There's your choil shot as far as how thin it is. And let's look at it on the board. this length, like a 235, 232, ish area is kind of a nice mid-length for, especially for a home kitchen where you don't necessarily want a full-on 240 or a 245. You want something just a little bit smaller for a cramped area. This is a nice kind of in-between size. So you can see their profile. They've got a fair amount of belly towards the tip, and then they've got a bit of a flat spot towards the heel. I'd say overall it's not real flat. It's kind of a pretty versatile profile. I can get really high on this as far as rock cutting just because of the way there's that angle of the belly towards the tip. So, this thing will rock really well. It's great at that. You can get nice and high on it for sure. And then you've got a little bit of a flat towards the back. So if you want a pure chopper, this is probably not it. But I think it's a fairly versatile profile, especially if you want to do some rocking. I'll show you a close-up of the spine here. And you can kind of see there's not a lot of distal taper. And then the tip, it's pretty thin at the very tip, but it's not like super, super, super thin. So these are pretty nicely made blades. The grind is very well done. It's not a hard edge like on a Masakage Yuki. So this is just an aesthetic right here. And you can kind of feel it as far as getting down into the edge. It's kind of in that general area, but it's kind of a smooth convex transition down into the edge. So they've got a nice grind on these. So just a good all-around knife. It, again, is all reactive. Just make sure you're aware of that. But here we have a pretty good classic all-reactive Gyuto. It's a popular, they sell out quickly when Mark gets them in. So this is the Mizuno Hontanren Blue number 2, Aogami number 2, Gyuto 240mm knife.